there was a really interesting moment in the book where you talk about global warming and our process of addressing global warming as evidence that actually we're getting better at this process, which of course is counterintuitive to most of us, because it's quite rational to feel like this is one of the most just cataclysmic errors we have made in not properly addressing the climate change, right? But you frame it kind of differently.
Well, the thing that we have to remember, and it's maybe cold comfort or hot comfort, as it were, given the nature of global warming, that what we're trying to do in thinking about climate change is something that is very hard for human beings to do, which is to think about the consequences of our actions today as they will affect the world in 20 years or 30 years or 50 years. And that is something really, truly that human beings have never done. So human beings in the past have built institutions, built structures, built infrastructure that was designed to last for hundreds of years, certainly in the past. But there's very little history of humans actually thinking about changes that are coming based on current trends that will make the world very different in 50 years or 100 years. The analogy would be when automobiles were invented, 120 years ago, if everybody, was looking at this new contraption and they're like, oh, this is really cool. But also, I think what's going to happen in about 50 years is that these suburbs will be built now that we have cars, and it will empty out the inner city core, and we'll end up having these crime problems, and we'll be outputting carbon in the atmosphere and the climate. What no one thought like that in 1900. They just said, hey, it looks like a carriage, but without the horse. Like, that was all people could think. And now we actually have gotten better. It's thanks in part to computers, which we often think of as being, exacerbating short-term Twitter attention spans. Thanks to computer modeling, we can think about 100 years of climate change, and we can think about how actions we're making today, that there will be consequences from those actions that will have a lag time of decades. And we can think about how to change our behavior. I bet you a lot of people in this room make day-to-day decisions that are shaped by concerns about the amount of carbon that will be in the atmosphere in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. That's a totally new way of thinking. And we're doing it now with artificial intelligence as well, right? There's this big debate about superintelligence that I talk about it near the end of the book, about the risk of superintelligent machines that might not be invented for another 50 years. And some people look at that and they say, why are you wasting your time? There's enough trouble as it is now, just trying to fix Facebook. Like, why are you worrying about, the Terminator in 50 years? But I think that's the exercise that actually we should have been doing with social media 10 years ago. And the fact that we're trying to think about, AI right now doesn't seem all that impressive. Like, Siri can't even figure out that I'm, trying to text my wife. Like, why am I worried about superintelligence? But if we don't make those kinds of forecasts and we don't think about what those long-term effects can be, it can be, that will get us into this trouble all over again. And so there's a technique. I want to make sure we cover some of the actual kind of tricks in the book. There's a great technique that I wrote about a little bit in this Times piece this weekend that is the creation of this guy, Gary Klein, who's a psychologist. He's Gladwell writes about him in Blink a little bit. And he came up with this technique that is this routine you do when you've almost made it to making your final choice, whether it's moving to California or launching a new product in your business, which is you've decided on path X. The last exercise you do is something that he calls a pre-mortem. And a pre-mortem is, as you can kind of guess from the name, is the opposite of a post-mortem. A post-mortem is the patient is dead, and it's the forensic scientist's job to figure out what killed the patient. A pre-mortem is the patient is going to die, and it's your job to figure out what killed the patient. So in the decision context, it's this decision that you have decided is the way to go. In 2 years, it will prove to be a catastrophic failure. Tell the story of how that failure happened. Force yourself to imagine this narrative of why this terrible, what seemed like a brilliant decision turned out to be an awful mistake. And that it turns out that you get very different results from people psychologically when you phrase the question that way, right? Instead of saying, hey, you want to you think you should go down this path. Do you see any flaws in that plan? When you ask people it that way, they're like, no, it looks great. It's a beautiful path. When you ask them, okay, invent the story of how this path ends up leading to disaster, they actually end up being more creative. They see flaws they wouldn't have otherwise seen. That is the routine that I believe the tech companies should be doing. I think it is actually, this is something that should be built into the tech culture. It's interesting thinking about a space like Betaworks. If you are in a disruptive industry and you are messing with, for good or for bad, the ways in which people create value or share information or share their ideas, I think it is important to run the pre-mortem on new products and features. I think this is what Facebook and Twitter did not do. They were like, well, if you connect everybody, the world will be a better place, right? That was the Zuckerberg kind of motto. And they didn't take the time to be like, how could this be manipulated and abused, not just from their own standpoint as a business, but from a broader kind of social standard. If you're going to go and move facts and break things, running those pre-mortems on how things might break in unanticipated ways is ethically an exercise that I think you really should be required to do on some level.